A silver ring falls through a cracked night sky and lodges itself on a lone warrior's finger as he awakens in a world made of blocks. Link, a hero out of Hyrule, stares across rolling pixel plains as the ring hums with a hungry voice, and the overworld listens. He wakes beneath a cubed sky that is too honest in its geometry, where stars are perfect squares and the moon a pale, blocky coin. The air tastes of earth and distant rain, of fresh-cut grass that snaps in cubic clumps underfoot. He is wrapped in damp wool that smells faintly of forest smoke and something older, old iron and sea brine, and the memory of battles that ended and would not stay ended. His hand finds the ring as if his fingers had always known the path. It is warm and cold at once, like a reflection of sunlight through ice. The metal bites gently, as though expecting to be owned rather than worn, and Link realizes with a quick, sharpened fear that it will not come off around him. The world is a mosaic of deliberate angles. Trees stacked like totems of emerald and chestnut cubes. A river flowing in stairsteps of glittering blue, distant mountains that rise like the teeth of a carved god. Villages dot the plains, clusters of square huts, villagers moving with jerky, human-like rhythms, their noises a language of pixels. Farther than the river, forests knit together like a dark tapestry, and beyond them, in the flatness of the horizon, the silhouette of a spire, stone too perfect to be natural, marks the place where the world will fold in upon itself. The ring whispers. It is not a voice that speaks words so much as patterns, hearing like the thunder of distant clouds, thinking like streams carving canyons through memory. The whisper is hungry and clever. It offers names and maps, promises and threats braided together. It calls itself many things: a key, a crown, a burden. It tells him there are doors beneath every hill and crowns beneath every ruin, that the living rods of redstone and the quiet hunger of endermen can be bent to the will of the right bearer. It hears the future as a symphony, and wants to conduct. Link has been called a hero in worlds of grass and folksong. A boy who once bore a blade that sang when it tasted malice. He remembers the master sword's weight like a promise, the touch of cool steel and the pressure of destiny. The ring is not a blade. It is a loop that closes on fate, and when it slides fully to the base of his finger, it hums as if in triumph. The sound crawls up his arm and settles in the hollows of his chest. The ring's hunger rubs against the small, fierce light inside him, the part of him that refuses wrongs and rises to meet them. The overworld listens. It is not subtle. Grass rolls its shoulders. Trees lean not as wood bending to wind, but as though listening themselves, their leaves like small ears catching the hum. A spider, 6 eyes shining like coal, freezes on its web and tilts its head. High above, a bat beats the air in a slow, ponderous cadence. A cluster of iron golems in a distant village, so placid until now, pivot their massive, blocky heads toward the figure on the hill. Even the sky seems to pay attention. The squares of sunset deepen, and the block sun slows its relentless glide, as if the world itself waits to see what a ringbearer will do. Link stands. The ring tugs at his spine not by force but by inducement, as if it knows how to ask a king to sit upon his throne without threatening him. It gives him glimpses, visions held at the edges of waking, a city with walls of obsidian, lined with banners that snap in a wind made of commands, a battlement of wolves, with glinting eyes, pillars of stone, leaping from the earth at his command, villagers looking up from their fields, and seeing not a stranger but a lord. Each picture is bright and simple, block true and monstrous in its promise. He resists the first impulses. He has seen how power can make men monstrous, but he cannot deny that every syllable struck some old, necessary chord. There is a hunger for righting wrongs, for bringing order to chaos, and the ring speaks the language of order. The ring's claim becomes a shaping force. Where Link's boots press into grass, Seeds quiver into sprouts. A hammering in his head becomes a map he knows, without having been taught, the recipe for a furnace, the geometry of a brewing stand, the weak point beneath a stone pillar. Knowledge falls into him like rain, primitive and bright, allowing him to coax fire from flint and to stack stone in a way that sings to the ground. The ring does not give him all things it teases, like a river showing the way to a waterfall. It provides enough that the world recognizes him as a conduit for something larger. A villager appears, a simple figure with a huge nose and eyes like dark buttons, walking with the slow, careful dignity of someone who plants and prays. She stops when she sees the ring on Link's hand, and her breath catches. The ring mirrors in her eyes like a star on still water. She clutches her basket and crosses herself in a gesture that could be superstitious reverence or the fossilized survival of a prayer. Around her, other villagers gather, drawn by the hum. Children press forward, their square faces filled with questions that are not yet words. Wolves, which pad from the nearby thicket like gray sentinels, slither into view and bow their muzzles to the ground in a ritual that seems to be both canine greeting and allegiance. Not all eyes are benign. In a copse of shadow, a creeper stands rigid, its green face unreadable, smell like moss and threat. It sways as the ring's hum finds some sympathetic frequency in its hollow chest. A hunger, ancient and percussive, throbs in the creature's body, and for a moment it seems on the verge of stepping forward, of becoming more than a mere monster, of being a weapon shaped by will. Farther still, from the yawning mouths of caves, the burnt amber eyes of skeletons glitter. They shuffle forward with the geometry of death marching, their bones clacking like the tick-tock of a siege clock. They hear the ring and lift their bony fingers as if taking orders. Link's training tells him to pull the ring from his hand, to scrap it into the river or bury it under 1,000 stones. But the ring draws on something older than his training, the hunger to fix what is broken, to bring peace by force. Over and over he has seen kingdoms crumble because none would grasp the reins when they frayed. He remembers faces, faces of the lost, of a princess wrapped in courage, of children watching as dark things rose, and the ring coils its words around those memories with a subtle cruelty. It promises the shortest paths, the most decisive cuts. Lead, it sings. Forge. Keep the land listens and answers back. Link lifts a hand, half to shake the insects free of his hair, half to test the ring's reach. The ground at his feet stutters like a piano key depressed, and lines of faint light outstretch from the ring into the soil. Where the light passes, seeds respond and stalk up into saplings. A square of dirt flips subtly and becomes a stair, then a wall, then a gate. The ring's will is not absolute, and the earth occasionally resists, but it moves in decrees enough to be dangerous. Nature offers up its blocks like subjects presenting their loyalty. He walks toward the village. Each step is an argument with fate. Villagers cluster to either side of the path, with torches held like votive candles. They murmur in that odd tongue of theirs, which is as much cluck and hum as it is speech to him. They do not flee, they approach with a mixture of wariness and need, as if the ring has given them a prophecy and they are fearful of how it will be fulfilled. An elder hands Link a loaf of bread, and when he accepts it, he feels the ring tighten, like a leash finding its perfect fit. A child reaches up and touches the ring with blunt fingers, and the ring purrs. The child giggles, and for a dizzy moment the laughter tastes like summer. But not all laughter in such a world is meant to remain unbothered. From the deepening edge of the map, where forest gives way to swamp and rumor, a band of armored figures carves their way through foliage with swords that gleam with a player-crafted precision. Adventurers, their armor is patched, their faces hidden, but their stance is that of those who answer to no crown but their own will. They watch Link like wolves watch an unfamiliar scent. One of them lifts a hand and sends a small flare of light, an offering and a question. Link holds his palm up, exposing the ring. The flare strikes the band of metal and peels the ring's surface like lacquer under a knife. For an instant, the silver becomes a window, and the explorers glimpse a landscape overlaid with possibility. Bridges across oceans, towers of obsidian, a black monolith crowned in gleaming eyes. "Who are you?" the leader asks, voice rough as gravel. He is not unkind, merely cautious. Link replies with a look, not words, because words are inadequate for the widening of his mind, and the ring speaks instead to the adventurers through the movement of the world. Crops in the village straighten. The sky lightens in a pattern akin to benediction. The adventurers' shoulders drop by a fraction. Perhaps they think to make pretense of loyalty, or perhaps they feel the ring's cunning invitation to power. Yet even as Link stands upon the threshold of authority, a shadow moves beneath the ring's music. The ring's voice is patient. It asks for time, for small commands, and then for obedience. The word wage floats like ash through the air, bare and sharp, untethered to any battlefield yet. Link's knuckles whiten on his sword's pommel. He remembers that wars begin with promises of peace. He remembers how good intentions can swell into empires of ash. The ring feels him waver, and with the tenderness of a spider wrapping prey, offers a glimpse of a world mended by force. A world where twilight is banished by the raising of walls, where monsters are marshaled into engines of state beyond them. The overworld keeps listening. High cliffs rearrange themselves. A mountain coughs a plume of gravel, and in the east the first block of an enormous, unnatural road lifts itself from the plains like a spine. The world answers the ring's call with a caution that is nearly reverence, as if the very laws of crafting and creation recognize the presence of a will that could shape them. Link feels that recognition like warmth on cold skin. He feels the weight of the ring, not merely as metal but as mandate. Night is falling in measured squares. Torches ignite like stars set by careful hands. The ring's hum grows to something like music, and beneath it, quieter and colder, the whisper of resistance begins, distant as the sea behind a wall. Somewhere in caves men do not know, Endermen turn their heads and consider. Far above, in dimensions not meant to be named, other eyes open. For now, in this patch of grass and sky, a hero stands with a ring on his finger, and the world bending toward him like a courtesan toward a king. Behind the ring's promises stands an older hunger for dominion in front of it. The possibility of remaking everything in the clean, terrible image of order. Link breathes deep. The breath is the breath of a warrior who has been shown a blade and told to decide whether to take it up. The ring shivers like an expectant animal. Around him, the villagers wait. The adventurers watch. The mob stir. The very earth listens. The claim has been made. Whether he will be bearer or tyrant, savior or conqueror, is a story yet to be sung. But the first note has been struck, and the overworld, patient and vast, bends its sharp ears to the sound, ready to answer in blocks or blood. When the band of iron circled his wrist, the ring did not sit like an ornament. It sank. It sank into the soft night of his skin and into the narrower places of his memory, learning the map of his hands. The world around him rearranged with the slow, relentless logic of tectonic thought. The trees thought of leaves in new patterns. The water moved to make black eddies, and even the moon, familiar and kindly, bent like a knowing eyebrow. The voice of the ring was not a voice in his ear. It was a tide that folded the country over. It spoke in the language of hunger, but also of promise. It named the stones, knew the old stories of caves, and it showed him how to take the shape of a thing and bend the world to that shape. At first his mind was a battlement, strict and ready. He cataloged the uses of darkness, stealth, concealment, the sharpening of blade. But the ring fed him with more than tools. It fed him with scenes dreams came down like rain. Cities wrought from prism and iron, battalions of cobblestone, banners sewn from obsidian, and machines that hissed with redstone. He would not simply be a warrior, he would be an architect of conquest. The ring whispered, and the world answered. The first sign of its claim was neither fire nor sword, but a child's stone golem. It creaked awake in the village to the south, molded of bones of wall and the broken axe of a fallen lumberjack. The villagers called it by a dozen names: protector, abomination, miracle. And in time they learned to call to it when wolves gathered. The golem did not have mercy programmed into its joints. It learned mercy from him, or perhaps it learned something darker. A neighbor who had once been a soldier told of seeing swarms of spiders form great meshes in the ruined temple to the east, their amber eyes glowing as if lit from some inside like furnace coals. From those webs he learned to weave. He took a spool of string and taught himself how to lay traps that did not merely snare, they became strategies, lattices that funneled and funneled again, until whole valleys moved upon his will. He fashioned helmets from pieced tinkle of gilded beetle shells. He sewed leather with scales of drowned fish. He hammered a banner from an old map. The ink of its continents made the borders of a new kingdom. Yet the ring's hunger was satisfied by more than implements. It wanted names, it wanted songs, it wanted oaths. Where Link could have led a handful of scouts, it demanded legions. He walked through his growing realm like a general testing each trench, but the trenches sometimes tested him in return. Faces in the crowd that he had known from earlier adventures blurred into masks, the old maps folded into new compasses. A messenger arrived from the coast, where fishermen swore that their nets had returned full of stones. The stones lay like fish along the sand, shimmering with an inner light as if a moon had been ground and sold at market. From them, Link built the first of his siege engines, a contrivance of wood and the inner light that hummed like contained stars. When it swung its arm, the stones it lashed flew like meteors, words spread as words do in small places. By the kitchen hearth, through the hush of midnight lanes, carried by the stubborn little birds that pecked at crumbs. Link bears a ring, the tale said, and with it came the murmur of fear. Fear braided itself with admiration. People are creatures of both threads. There were those who came bearing supplies, swearing fealty, because to stand near power is a way to be seen. There were others who watched in the shadow, counting the days and the insults their own hearts afforded them, wondering whether the ring might be a mirror rather than a shackle. The forest of Enderwood whispered, and the Endermen who lurked within found themselves moved by sympathy rather than command. They did not bow outright, but they began to carry odd things: gleaming pebbles, old trinkets, and sometimes the kernels of villages, the small memories that keep people in their houses. A council of villagers met beneath the arch of a ruined bridge. They argued like islanders, slow with the navigation of fear. "We must ask him," said a woman whose hands were always stained with dye. "Ask him what?" said a man whose beard was full of seeds. They sent a child at first, because children speak with a smaller vocabulary, and simple things frighten them less. The child went with a loaf of bread and a stick of chalk. When he reached the camp, the ring had already found other mouths. Link sat by the dying embers of a fire, and he listened with a patience like a man with a map learning the coastlines. The child's chalk smudged across his palm and then across the ring. No song came from the child, only a small astonishment. Link took the bread and broke it into 2 pieces. He fed the child, and then he said a name out loud. The name was a simple ringing thing that hung in the air like a bell. Oath. The child repeated it, chewing the sound as though tasting salt. Around them others drew near, and the ring hummed like a storm kept in the throat. Link spoke as one who knows maps of both wood and heart. "If you stand with me," he said, I will not ask you to be anything but true. The word true hung there like a lantern. Men who had never been brave found that they could be. Women who had worn fear like a second skin shed it and came with baskets and tongs. It was not perfect. The ring watched as if it counted each kindness, filing it away for a future ledger. There were nights he woke with the taste of iron in his mouth, and he walked the ramparts of his growing camp like a man who counts the heads of those he has not yet slain. The ring taught him another art, how to unmake without the clatter of smithing. A hedgerow that used to shelter alone in the wood became a scar. It undid itself like a weaver taking thread back into darkness. Where molehills had been there were now sluices, sinkholes, and places that sang underfoot, subtle music that taught any who passed to be quieter. Some of those who had sworn with him began to speak in softer tongues. They sat in the dark and spoke of provinces they would claim. They named hills after themselves. And the ring watched with a patience like a cat. There came a man from the western farms who had a face as if he had forgotten to be gentle. He challenged Link in the market about a boundary, a strip of reed and mud both claimed as pasture. Words became measured stones. The market emptied as if a storm had come through. They met at dawn, and it was not a song that settled between them. A blade sang once, high and brief, and then a sound like breaking rock. The farmer fell first, as farmers do, with a surprise inside their ribs. Link did not exult when the man fell. The ring hummed approvingly and then fell strangely quiet, as if listening for something else. He knelt and closed the farmer's eyes. He wrapped a hand around the man's pulse and felt a small thread of life that ran and out. Grief is a kind of metal. It rings. Link felt its sound in his chest, and the ring leaned into that hollow, filling it with a different metal, colder, harder alloy. From the place of the fight, men went back to their doors carrying news like a contagion. Some who had sworn required no longer to be on Link's side. They left their knapsacks empty, and their oaths folded away like maps. But for every man who fled, there were 3 who stayed and took the oath still warm from his mouth. They were an herbwoman, a blacksmith, and a former guard of the old watch. They did not ask to be sainted in his ledger. They asked for work, places by which to measure the days. So he gave them fortifications to tend, granaries to watch, and a smithy that glowed with a steady heat. The ring did not delight in such simple kindnesses, but it counted them. It banked them like coal, and the pile of small mercies made a different sort of fire. Outside the camp, the land continued to change. Rivers that had run shallow and patient began to cut themselves new courses. Wind sheared across the blackened fields, as if the world itself had learned to breathe in a new, lower key. Link stood upon the ridge, the grass around him crisping to obsidian under the ring's shadow. It was no longer merely an object on his finger. It pulsed like a heart, small and terrible, and every beat sent ripples through the cubic earth. Below, the river that had once run clear like polished glass now moved like mercury, strands of night tangled in its flow. The first lines of his army were assembling. Villagers, grim and alert, battered iron golems rubbing shoulders with re-equipped pillagers, wolves with eyes silvered by something like loyalty and fear. The ring drew a thin, precise light across the sky, directing them, drawing them with authority that was older than any banner. When the first trumpet sounded, it was not wood and horn, but a chorus of creaking doorframes and clanged anvils. The ring's voice had no syllables, only a pressure in the air, and yet the meaning settled into Link's chest like a stone. Claim. You are called. You are claimed. He had borne darkness before, in caverns that tasted of rot, in shadows that whispered his failures, but this claiming was different. It did not shout, it simply rearranged things. Paths bent toward him, stray mobs in the hinterlands found new purpose as scouts or sentries. Endermen, long solitary, paused midlife and watched with bright, understanding eyes. The ring made the earth listen. Link raised the blade that would always be his, not with ceremony but with a surgeon's patience. The master sword took on a sheen like moonpalist basalt. It hummed in sympathy, then in discord, as if it recognized an old oath and a new order at once. He felt the memory of his oaths, of spraying light across Hyrule's dark, and nested beneath it a whisper that promised absolute unity. Nearly without meaning to, Link heard cities counting him not as savior but as sovereign. He felt the weight of a crown that did not exist, the geometry of rule pressing like a skin he could grow into movement along the tree line, announced the arrival of the first contingent from beyond the sea. Ironclad barges, strange in shape, pulled by piglins mounted on basalt boars, banners stamped with the ring's sigil, a thin circle. Not ornate but unavoidable. They landed with the inertial grace of ships crashing into sand, and from their bellies spilled war machines crafted from redstone and bone. Carts with piston mouths, catapults sling-wired with gravel and enchanted bone, a battering ram that breathed sulfur. Link watched, feeling part commander and part thrall, as the ring rearranged the inventory of the world to suit itself. The ring's claim unfolded as architecture. Where Link's foot fell, a small column of black stone sprouted like a sprout of frost. Sigils unfurled around them in glyphs that were not made by any hand, running through the dirt like veins. Villagers who opposed him found their voices, turned small and polite. Those who welcomed him became embers of zeal. Even the sky altered. Clouds thickened not into weather but into heraldry, casting long, barbed shadows that sharpened the shapes of things below. When dawn came, it was as if more than sun rose, a new, dim star had settled behind Link's shoulder and made the world its silhouette. He did not march alone. At his flank strode a new breed of ally, armored wolves with plates grown of obsidian, their sponsors the ring's invisible artisan. Golems with inscriptions in redstone marched like cathedral columns. But the most unnerving accompaniment was the legion of undead, not mindless but precise, skeletons and zombies whose joints clicked with clockwork timing. They obeyed him without being cruel. They were efficient instruments in a symphony written by hunger. Under Link's hand, they were not abomination but calculus, a means to an end. And yet he felt each step they took echo against his ribs like admonition. The first clash came at a crossroads where the map folds of the biome met plains into taiga, a river braided by reeds. A scouting band of piglins, their tusks ringed with torque, had skirmished with a band of Endermen sentinels that had taken to lifting tiny towers of wood as offerings. The ring, finally, let its voice become a visible thing, a thin halo of smoke that rose and braided itself into the sky, unwinding an ancient knot. It did not attack, it declared. It sent a precise demand, and the two groups, bewildered, lowered their empty weapons as if embarrassed. Link stepped forward, and the ring's warmth became a map upon his tongue. Command poured through him, not in words but in intent, and he pointed toward the horizon. The piglins, the endermen, the golems, the villagers, the wolves, all shifted like an army turning toward the signal of a drum. They reformed not because of threat, but because of a grammar older than language. To cluster, to follow, to make something larger from small lives. The ring made him a nucleus. Among those watching was a lone figure he had not expected to confront. An old villager, his back bent like a spade into the earth, one eye gone and the other kept like a coal of stubbornness. He had lived through raids, through blights and floods, and his gaze did not glint with fear. "This will not end in forging," the man croaked, voice dry as parchment. "You think to bind the world with a circle, boy, but circles trap. They do not hold breath. There is a price for shaping that much." Lifelink knelt and heard old arguments rise, the memories of what he had fought for and why. He could turn and smite the villager. The ring would not have begrudged it. He could have used force and erased the discomfort like a stain. The ring's pulse quickened. like hunger building momentum. He felt the tug toward supremacy, toward the clean lines of a map edited to his command. He felt also how easily it could equal silence. He thought of the breath of Zelda, of the last thing she had said, a plea, a name, and it scraped at the inside of him like a talon. The claim was not merely about the coercion of flesh, but the reshaping of land and law. The ring, through him, issued decrees that were both whisper and earthquake. Hills rearranged, rivers found new beds, around which bridges sprang from arranged planks with tendons of redstone. Mines opened underground like lungs, and out of them poured ore that answered the ring's need for empire. The ring extended its reach into the logic of the game itself. Swamps became saltless, their slimes denser, deserts learned to hold water in hollows made like wells for a king. It was subtlety that made it monstrous. Every change made as if for a better world, easier to govern, and each improvement left a fracture of loss. Not all surrendered. From the east came a band of archers and adventurers. A ragged corps once called independent wanderers, now a coalition. Alex among them, dark-haired and resolute, a figure in dented diamond armor, who had been little more than a rumor in trade halls, a chat of players with torches and hunger bars like battle scars. They had heard of a power reassembling the land and had come to ask, is this salvation or domination? Their arrows flew not with hate but with question. They accused the claim with silence, and still the first volley rattled against the ring's enchantments like pebbles on chainmail. Arrows shivered into ghosts before reaching flesh. They fell as if into a hidden pond. Yet where they struck the land itself, fissures opened small, and then trailing wider. The ring, it seemed, required permission to bind reality without friction. Resistance, even if tiny and poor, caused the fabric to pull and reveal seams. From one such seam stumbled a thing not fully summoned, a wither skeleton, its 3 skulls still dreaming of bone and ash, its depths unaligned to the ring's tidy commands. It staggered and then saw Link, and in its ragged jaw was the last of the old world's refusal. It was then that Link felt the ring's other voice, a voice not of command but of calculation, cool as a forge. Join me, it seemed to say, and the world will obey your reason. Resist, and the world will lurch, tore by the contradictory pulls. He realized that the claim functioned by harmonizing intent. It did not wish to annihilate will so much as to synchronize it. To be claimed was to be made part of one music. He had a choice, though his finger pulsed and the ring's gold swallowed the light. He could let the claim swell and become law,